Welcome. My name is Hemant Kaidani. I am a senior architect in the technical marketing group at VMware. In this video, I will show you how to install and configure vCenter Operations Manager, which is part of the vCenter Operations Management Suite. The vCenter Operations Manager is packaged as a vApp, which means it consists of two virtual machines that work together. The installation itself has 4 different steps. In the first step, you have to prepare your environment. Make sure you have all the prerequisites that are taken care of. Then we actually deploy the vApp. After the deployment is complete, we will do the post-install configuration to make sure it points to the right vCenter servers. And finally, we'll apply the licensing. So let's begin with the first step, which is the preparation step. As part of the preparation step, you have to make sure that you have the right ESX and vCenter versions. The vCenter Operations Manager vApp installs on vCenter Server 4.0 Update 2 and above, and also needs ESX Server 4.0 and above. You can access vCenter Operations Manager through 2 different user interfaces. You can access it through a browser, or you can access it from vSphere client. In both cases, you need to have Internet Explorer 7.0 or above and Firefox 3.0 or above on your machine. In addition to this, you need to have few ports that need to be open. So for example, you need to have port number 22 open for SSH access, and you also need to have ports 443 for secure HTTP and port number 80 open so that you can access the virtual appliances. The 2 VMs that are part of the vCenter Operations vApp also need to talk to each other. They use port number 1194 to set up a tunnel between the 2. The next thing that you need to do is configure IP pools in your environment. Now, the term IP pools is kind of a misnomer. You don't really create a pool of IP addresses. What you are really doing is setting up some network metadata so that the vCenter Operations Manager VMs can get the subnet, the gateway information. If you need DNS and proxy settings, you can capture that. So to do that, launch the vSphere client and click on the IP pools tab. Once you are in the IP pools tab, we're going to click on Add, give it a name. I'm going to just call it VCOps 5. Need to provide the subnet. So this is going to be, in my case, it's 192.168.1.1.0.0. The gateway is 192.168. The most important thing to remember here is not to check this Enable IP Pool checkbox. Again, this has to be left blank. I'm going to now go to the association screen and associate the IP pool with the network that we are going to use. Click OK, and you should have your IP pools created. Once the IP pool is created, we are now ready to deploy the vApp. To deploy the vApp, make sure you have downloaded the OVA file. In this case, I have downloaded the OVA file. On some browsers, the OVA file may be named as a .tar file. So in that case, you need to rename it as a .ova file. Go to the File menu and click Deploy Ovf Template. I'm going to browse through the Downloads folder where I have downloaded that. Select the OVA file, open it, and then click Next. Here you can see the OVA template details. As you can see, this particular vApp consists of 2 different VMs, and it's going to take about 336 gigabytes of disk space on disk when it is thick provisioned. It is strongly recommended that you use thick provisioning. for good performance. If you use thin provisioning in production environment, your performance is not going to be acceptable. Click Next. Make sure you accept the license agreement. Click Next. Provide the name to your vCenter Operations Manager instance. I'm going to leave it at the default name. Click Next. Here you can select 3 different deployment configurations. The out-of-the-box configuration is the small configuration, which requires 4 vCPUs and 16 gigs of memory for the vApp. You can always go to the medium configuration, which uses 8 vCPUs and 25 gigs of memory. The small configuration can be used for up to 1500 VMs. The medium configurations, you can use that if you need between 1500 to 3000 VMs. Or you can choose the large configuration if your deployment has more than 3000 VMs. vCenter Operations Manager today supports up to 6000 powered on VMs and 8000 registered VMs. The large configuration needs 16 vCPUs and 34 gigs of memory. Note that the resources are not split equally between the 2 VMs. The analytics VM, the second VM, usually takes up more resources than the first VM. In case you choose the small or the medium configuration and you want to ramp up to a larger configuration, it's very easy. All you need to do is change the CPU and memory for the 2 VMs and reboot the vApp. And the vCenter Operations Manager vApp will automatically tune itself to adjust to the larger configuration. I'm going to select the small configuration here, click Next, and use the same cluster here, Rainpole HQ, click Next. Again, I'm going to select the default resource pool configuration, click Next. Now you've got to select the storage space. As I mentioned before, you have to use thick provisioning for better performance. In this demo environment, I'm going to just go ahead and choose, if you don't have enough storage space, you are going to see this insufficient disk space warning at the bottom here. I'm going to click Next here. It's automatically selected thin provisioning because I didn't have enough space. You do have a choice to select lazy zeroing or eager zeroing options with thick provisioning. It's recommended that you use eager zeroed so that all the storage I/O blocks are zeroed before you actually start using the vCenter Operations Manager vApp. Click Next. In this case, you need to select your destination network. So there is a drop-down box here that lets you change the network in case you are using a different one. Make sure you are using the network that you configured as part of your IP pool configuration. Click Next. Here you get to choose the IP allocation policy. It is recommended that you use the fixed IP addresses. Transient is absolutely not recommended. And it's also recommended that if you have chosen DHCP, you don't change it to fixed IP after the deployment. In case you have to do that, I recommend that you either do a new installation or you can talk to our support who can help you with that, changing your IP address configuration here. Never change the IP address from the blue console screens of the virtual appliances. Always use the administrative UI to change the IP addresses for this VMs. Click Next. This is where you get to choose your time zone. So I'm going to choose my time zone here and choose the IP addresses for your environment. So now we need to make sure we select the correct time zone and then provide the IP addresses for the 2 VMs. So there we go, we have the 2 IP addresses. Click Next. So at this point you can see the summary of the vApp that's going to be deployed. I'm going to just click finish to let it go through. Once you click finish, you will see the small dialog box here which says it's deploying vCenter Operations Manager. At this point it is going to take several minutes to deploy this. For the purposes of this video, we are going to fast forward it and we'll start once the deployment is done.